morning of September 22nd, in the Bitterroot Range of Ravalli County, Montana, a solo climber named Isaac Redfern went up a drainage below Sky Pilot Peak and did not come back down the way he planned. He was 34 years old. He had been scrambling alone in that country for 11 years, and by every account, he was careful, quiet, and hard to rattle. He came off the mountain alive, but he came back terrified, paranoid, and he would not go back into that drainage ever again.
The record of what happened to him sits in two places. The first is roughly 90 minutes of helmet camera footage that Redfern did not review for several weeks after he shot it. The second is an incident log entered by a search and rescue volunteer named Marlo Quist, who watched the file after Redfern finally handed it over and wrote down what could be measured and nothing that could not. What follows is drawn from that footage and from the account Redfern gave when he was asked to describe, in his own words, the 4 hours he spent in a lodgepole pine above a fresh elk kill. This is his account. I want to start by saying I do not believe in things. I never have. I am the person who finds the logical answer and I hold on to it. I need you to know that about me before I tell you the rest, because the rest is going to sound like a man who lost his grip. And I did not lose my grip. I know exactly what I saw. I left the trailhead a little before 5. It was still dark. I liked the early start because I liked the mountain to myself, and I had the whole drainage to myself that morning, or I thought I did. The plan was simple. Go up the east side, scramble the ridge, come down the bench trail by noon. I had done pieces of it before. I knew the ground. I had told my landlord where I was going because I always do, and I had a full day of food and water and a small first aid kit and the helmet camera I run on every climb, and none of it was going to matter in the way I thought it might. The first 2 hours were good, cold, clear, the kind of morning where you can hear your own boots on the scree and nothing else. I stopped once to eat and drink and watch the light come up over the far wall. I remember thinking it was the best I had felt in months. I want you to hold on to that I was calm, that I was happy because of what came after. There was a stretch after that first stop where I was moving through open timber, big, widely spaced trees, easy walking, and I remember being aware that a couple of ravens had been with me for a while. They were up in the crowns, moving when I moved, calling now and then. I did not think anything of it at the time. Ravens will follow a person in that country out of pure curiosity. It is only looking back that I understand they were not following me. They were following the thing that was ahead of both of us, and I was just walking into the middle of it. It was the quiet that I noticed first. I was maybe 3 hours in, moving through a stretch of timber below the ridge, and I realized I had not heard a bird in a while. Not the ravens, not anything. No jays, no nuthatches, nothing. In that country, there is always something. Squirrels running their mouths, a raven somewhere. But the woods had gone flat and still, and my body knew before my head did that something was off. I slowed down. I started paying attention. There was a smell before the real smell too, and I only put that together afterward. Not the copper and hide that came later. This was a rank, heavy animal muss, like a wet dog the size of a horse, and it came and went on the little bit of wind that was moving. I told myself it was a bull elk in rut, because they can throw a stink you would not believe that time of year, and that was a perfectly good answer, and I took it and kept walking. Then I caught the other smell, copper and wet hide, thick, close. It is the smell of an animal that has been opened up, and I knew it right away because I have field-dressed elk and I have come up on bear kills before. My first thought was exactly that. Bear on a kill. That is the smell of a bear on a kill. So I did what you are supposed to do. I stopped. I did not push toward it. I started to back off the line I was on and swing wide, give whatever it was plenty of room, because the last thing you want in that country is to come between a bear and its food. I have done this a dozen times. It is routine. You just quietly leave. But the ground funneled me. The timber was thick on my left, and there was a little rock band on my right, and the only clean way through went right along the edge of a small clearing. I stood at the bottom of that funnel for a minute, trying to think of another way, and there was not a good one. Not without going back the way I had come and losing an hour and a half. And I was tired, and I was sure it was a bear and bear's leave. So I told myself I would move fast and quiet across the open and be gone before anything noticed me. I came up out of the trees into the edge of that clearing, and I saw the elk first. It was a cow elk, and it was fresh, and it had been opened up in a way that stopped me cold. Not torn the way a bear does it, opened. The ribs were spread. There was a neatness to the wrongness of it that I did not have a word for. A bear tears into the gut and the hindquarters and makes a mess of it. This was not a mess. This was something that had taken the animal apart with intention. And I stood there at the tree line looking at that elk for what was probably 2 seconds and felt like an hour. And every part of me that had been calm all morning went to ice. And then I looked up from the elk, and it was standing there. I'm going to try to describe it the way I saw it, and I'm going to fail because there is no describing it. It was on the far side of the kill, upright, and it was tall. Not tall like a big man, tall in a way that made the trees behind it look wrong, over 7 feet easy. It was covered in hair, dark rust brown going to almost black at the shoulders, and it was heavy through the chest and the arms in a way that I cannot put next to any animal I know. The arms were long. That is a thing I noticed even in that first second, that the arms came down too far, that the reach on it was all wrong. It was the face that broke me. I keep trying to tell people, and I keep coming back to the face. It was not an ape. It had a heavy bone brow and a broad flat nose and a wide face with no muzzle on it, a face that was closer to a person than to anything else. And that was the worst part. The eyes were flat, and they caught the light in a way eyes are not supposed to, a dull shine like water at the bottom of a well. It was looking at the elk when I came out of the trees. And then it turned its head and it looked at me. I did not decide to climb. I need to be clear about that. My body climbed. There was a lodge pole at the edge of the clearing, not a big one, and I was up it before my mind had finished the thought. I have climbed my whole life. I have gone up rock and ice and trees since I was a kid, and I have never in my life moved the way I moved up that pine. I do not remember the first 15 feet. I remember being high in it with my arms locked around the trunk and my heart going like a hammer and the bark biting into me and looking down. It had not moved. It was still standing over the elk, watching me go up. And I remember this clear thought landing in me, cutting right through the panic, which was that it could have stopped me. It was close enough and fast enough that it could have crossed that clearing and stopped me, and it chose to watch me climb instead. I did not understand yet why that mattered. I would. For a while, it just looked at me. I hung in that tree maybe 30 feet up, and it stood down there and looked up, and I told myself, all right, it is a wild animal, it will lose interest, it will take the elk and go, I just have to wait. That is what I told myself. Wait it out. Stay quiet, stay still, wait it out. I even tried to think about the camera on my helmet, tried to make myself a witness instead of a victim, tried to hold on to the idea that I was recording this, and that meant I was going to live to show it to somebody. It helped for about a minute, then it stopped helping, then it walked over to my tree. It did not run, it did not charge. It walked unhurried the way you would walk across a room, and it put both hands on the trunk of the pine below me. and it shook the tree. The first one was not hard. That is the thing I keep coming back to. The first one was almost gentle. A short pull, a test, like a man checking a fence post to see if it is set. The whole tree moved, and I felt it in my hands and my teeth, and I clamped on and held. And then it stopped, and it looked up at my face. I want to describe what that felt like, to be looked at like that. It was not the look of an animal working out how to get at food. I have seen that look. This was different. It was reading me. It shook the tree, and then it stopped, and it looked up to see what the shaking had done to my face. And I understood in a way I could not have explained then and can barely explain now that my fear was the thing it was interested in. Not me, not getting me down, my fear. The shaking was just how it turned the fear on so it could watch it. It shook it again, harder. This one I felt in my whole body, the trunk whipping, needles coming down around me, and I heard myself make a sound I have never made before. And it stopped again, and it looked up again, and it watched me. And then it did a thing that I have not told many people, because it is the part that makes them look at me sideways. It tipped its head. When it looked up at me after that second shake, it tipped its head a little to the side, the way a person does when they are studying something they find interesting. That small human movement on that huge inhuman body was worse than the shaking. I would have taken an hour of shaking over that one tilt of the head. That was the pattern. That was the whole thing, for what the footage says was close to 4 hours, though I would have told you it was days. It would shake the tree harder each time, testing how far the trunk would go and how far I would go with it. And then it would stop, and it would go still, and it would look up at my face and read what was there. And then it would do it again. There were breaks in it. That is a thing people do not expect when I tell it. It was not 4 solid hours of shaking. It would work the tree for a while, and then it would just stop and wander back over to the elk and pick at it, tear a little off, eat all the while with one eye on me. And I would hang there 30 feet up with my arms screaming and think, this is it. It is done with me. It is going to eat and leave. And I would let myself believe that. And then it would come back. During one of those breaks, it did something I have never been able to explain to anybody in a way that does not make me sound insane, so I will just tell it flat. It picked up a rock, a good-sized one the size of a softball. And it looked at me and it threw it. Not at me. That is the thing. It did not throw it at me. It threw it into the trunk of my tree, a little below where I was, hard enough that I felt the whole pine ring with it, and bark flew. And then it stood there and looked up at my face to see what I did. And a while later, it did it again, another rock, same thing, into the trunk, never at me, always just below me, always then that look up to read my face. I have gone around and around on what that was. The only thing I keep landing on, and I hate it, is that it was not trying to hit me. It was showing me that it could. It was showing me it could put a rock exactly where it wanted to, again and again, and letting me do the math on what would happen if it ever decided to aim a foot higher. That is not throwing. That is a demonstration. Animals do not give demonstrations. And once, only once, it did a thing with its voice. Between the shaking and the rocks, in one of the long, still stretches, it opened its mouth and it made a sound at me. And it was not a roar and it was not a howl. It rose and it fell. It had shape to it, pieces, a rhythm, the cadence of something that meant something. The way a sentence in a language you do not speak still lands on your ear as a sentence and not as noise. It looked right up at me, and it said something to me. I will go to my grave believing it was trying to tell me something or asking me something, and that the only reason I lived is that I never had the first idea how to answer. There was one stretch, a long one where it sat down. It lowered itself down at the base of my tree with its back against the trunk, almost casual, like a man taking a rest in the shade. And it did not shake the tree at all. It just sat there under me. And that was its own kind of torture because I could not see it well from directly above, and I did not know what it was doing, and I did not dare move to look. I just hung there feeling the weight of it against the base of the tree, listening to it breathe. This slow, heavy breathing, and once a sound low in its chest that I can only call a hum. Not a growl, a low, tuneless hum, like a person makes when they are content and not thinking about it. I have never been more frightened in my life than I was listening to that thing hum to itself at the bottom of my tree. And I made the mistake during that long, quiet stretch of letting myself hope it was over. I felt my grip start to loosen just a little. My body, past exhaustion, started to believe the danger had passed because the shaking had stopped. And the second I did, the second my body relaxed, it came up off the ground and hit the tree so hard I nearly came out of it. And I swear to you, I swear on anything you want, that it knew. It waited for me to hope, and it took the hope away on purpose. It was not trying to shake me loose. If it wanted me loose, I would have been loose in the first minute. It was doing this because it wanted to watch me be afraid, and it wanted to watch me stop being afraid so it could make me afraid again. That is not an animal. I have hunted and guided and been in the woods my whole life. Animals do not do that. That is something with a mind, and the mind was enjoying itself. The worst one came late. By then the light had moved and the shadows had gone long, and I was past exhausted, my arms locked into a cramp, my hands raw, my face wet, and I did not even remember starting to cry. It came back to the tree from where it had wandered off to sit near the elk, and it took the trunk in both hands and it bent it, not shook, bent. The whole pine went over further than a tree should go, and I was looking almost straight down at the ground, and the needles were raining, and I was certain, absolutely certain, that it was going to pull the whole thing out of the earth by the roots, and I was going to come down into whatever it wanted. I stopped making sound at that point. I just held on and waited to fall. I remember the bark cracking somewhere below me, a long, tearing green sound. And I remember thinking with a strange, flat calm, that is the tree going, that is it, and being almost relieved that the waiting was going to be over. And then it let go. The tree snapped back up so hard it nearly threw me off the other way, and I hung there shaking, and it stepped back and looked up at me one more time, and it did not touch the tree again. That is how it ended, not with a fight, not with a fall. It just stopped. It was done. Whatever it had wanted from me, it had gotten, and its interest went out like a light. There was no drama to it. It simply lost interest in me the way you would lose interest in a phone once you had read everything on it, and it turned away from my tree and walked back to the elk. What the footage shows next can be measured. The animal lowered itself over the elk carcass, and then it lifted the carcass with one hand and stood back upright with it, and it carried the elk out of the clearing at a walking pace on two legs without appearing to labor. Marlowe Quist logged the estimated field weight of a mature cow elk and noted discrepancy without comment. That was not in the log as a claim about anything. It was in the log as a number that did not fit, a mass being carried one-handed by something walking upright and unbothered. And the number sat there in the report next to the timestamps and said nothing and meant everything. Redfern stayed in the tree for a recorded 51 minutes after the animal left the clearing before he came down. The footage from those 51 minutes is mostly the ground and his own breathing, and twice his voice, very quiet, telling himself it was gone, asking himself if it was gone, not sure enough to move. There is one detail from the footage that Quist flagged and that Redfern himself did not notice while it was happening. On the clearest frames in the long stretch where the animal stood still at the base of the tree and looked up. The left ear is visible and there is a torn notch out of the top of it. An old healed injury, a clean V missing from the edge of the ear. It is a small thing. It is the kind of thing you would only notice if you were looking or if you had reason to look again later. The other detail is the last one, and it is the one Redfern will not let go of, and it is the one that cannot be measured. He says that as the animal turned to carry the elk away, it looked back at him one more time. And he says that on its face, on that wide, flat, almost human face, there was something he has no good word for. Not a smile. He is careful to say it was not a smile, but something in the set of the mouth and the eyes that a person would call, if a person were wearing it, amusement. Something that had been entertained, something that was, in the last second before it walked into the timber, pleased with how the afternoon had gone. He has been asked what he thinks it meant. He does not answer. He says he thinks about it every day and he does not answer, because the only answers he has are worse than not knowing. That is where his account ends. He came off the mountain by a longer route in the last light, favoring cramped arms he could barely close. And he drove home, and he did not look at the footage for 3 weeks. And when he did, he watched it once, all the way through, and then he called Marlowe Quist. Real or fake, you decide. This is a second report of the same Bigfoot from the same stretch of the Bitterroot. On the morning of October 14th, roughly 3 weeks after Isaac Redfern came down out of his tree, a man named Odell Prieto and a woman named Junie Marsh were glassing the edge of a meadow in the Sleeping Child drainage, one drainage over from where Redfern had his encounter. Prieto was 41, Marsh was 38. They were not looking for anything unusual. They were looking for elk sign. And Prieto had a camcorder running because he liked to keep footage of the country. They both walked out. The footage runs about 90 seconds. It would have been filed and forgotten as one more shaky clip of something dark at a tree line, except that the same search and rescue volunteer who had logged the Redfern file, Marlowe Quist, watched it and noticed something in it and went back and put the two files side by side. What follows is Odell Prieto's account as he gave it. We were not out there for a story. I want that clear, because once you tell people what you saw, they decide you went looking to see it, and we did not. We were watching a meadow for elk, that is all. Let me back up and tell it right, because the how of getting there matters to me. Junie and I have been coming up to the Sleeping Child for years. We are not hunters, not really, not anymore. We hike and we glass, and we like to know where the herds are moving. And we had a spot we liked at the top of a long meadow where you could sit in the timber edge and watch the whole open run of it come alive at first light. That is where we were headed that morning. We left the truck at the pullout before dawn and walked in maybe 40 minutes to the spot. And it was a beautiful cold morning still, bright coming on, and we settled in at the edge of the trees with a thermos and the binoculars, and Prieto has the camera because Prieto always has the camera. Here's the thing I noticed on the walk-in that I did not think about until later. There was no game. In years of walking that trail in the early morning, we always jumped something. A deer, a grouse, a coyote sliding off through the brush. That morning, nothing. The trail was dead. We walked 40 minutes through country that is usually crawling at that hour, and we did not see one living thing, and I remember Junie saying, "Quiet, where is everything?" and me saying they have moved down, and neither of us thinking any more about it than that. But the woods had emptied out ahead of us, and I know now what empties woods out like that, and it was already there, and it already knew we were coming up the trail before we had any idea it existed. there is one more thing from before, and I go back and forth on whether it means anything, but I said I would tell it straight, so I will tell it. The night before, we had camped at the pullout, slept in the back of the truck, and sometime in the dead middle of the night, I woke up because something had knocked, not on the truck. Out in the timber, off toward the drainage, a sound like a length of hardwood struck once against a tree. A hard, hollow clack that carried in the still air, and then nothing. I lay there and waited, and a while later, further off, it came again. Once. Junie slept through it. I told myself it was a branch coming down, a dead snag letting go, and I went back to sleep. I know now that is a sound people report from that country, and I did not know it then, and I have thought a lot since about the fact that it did that twice in the dark near where we slept, and then in the morning it was waiting for us up the trail, and about whether those two things have anything to do with each other, and I have decided that they do. And that it knew we were there before we ever got out of the truck. We got to the spot and we sat, and for a while it was just a beautiful morning. And then Junie went quiet, which is not like her, and she put her hand on my arm and she pointed across the meadow to the far tree line. And there was something dark standing at the edge of the timber. My first read, honest to God, was bear. Big black bear up on its hind legs having a look at the meadow. That is a thing bears do. So I did not panic. I raised the camera and I put it on the dark shape and I started filming. The way you would film a bear, because a bear at that distance is a nice thing to have on tape and no reason to be afraid. I even said it out loud. On the tape you can hear me. I said, "Got a bear. Look at that," in this pleased dumb voice, and I have watched that part back more times than I want to admit. The sound of a man who has no idea what he's looking at. I kept the camera on it and I talked myself through it the way you do. "Black bear," I said, "look at it stand." And Junie did not say anything, and I looked over the top of the camera at her face and she was not looking at it like it was a bear. She had gone pale and she had gone completely still. And she said, very low, "That is not a bear, Odell." And something in how she said it put a cold finger right down my spine before I had even looked again. So I looked again at the thing itself, not through the camera, just with my eyes. And it started to walk, and a bear does not walk like that. It came along the tree line on two legs, smooth, arm swinging, covering ground the way a person covers ground, except that no person is that size, and no person moves through brush like it is not there. It did not push through the brush. It came through it like the brush was not an obstacle to it at all, like it was walking across a lawn, and the scale of it against the trees at the edge of the meadow was all wrong. It was head and shoulders into the lower branches of full-grown trees, and the word bear went out of my head and did not come back. I do not like saying the other word, but I am going to say it because you deserve the truth of what I thought in that moment and what I thought was Bigfoot. That is a Bigfoot. That is the thing people up here talk about, and I never once believed them. And there it is, walking along the tree line in the daylight. I did not believe in it, and I was looking right at it, and both of those things were true at the same time, and my head could not hold them together. It crossed the top of the meadow. It was in no hurry. It moved along the timber, and it did not look at us, or it did not seem to, and I got maybe 40 seconds of it just walking. This huge, dark, upright shape against the trees, the hair on it dark and heavy, the way it swung its arms so easy, and I remember thinking, in this stupid, calm way, that we were safe because it did not care about us. It had somewhere to be. It was just passing through, and we happened to be there to see it. Junie had a hold of my arm the whole time, and neither of us moved, and I kept the camera as steady as I could, and I let myself believe, for about 40 seconds, that we were going to get to watch this thing walk out of our lives the same way it had walked into them. While it walked, it did a thing that I only understood later, watching the tape back. It kept its head turned toward us. Its body was going one way, along the tree line, but its face stayed pointed across the meadow at where we were sitting. The whole time it walked, like a man crossing a room who cannot stop looking at something on the far wall. At the time, in the moment, I did not clock it. I was too taken with the size and the fact of it. But on the tape it is plain, and it is the thing that turns my stomach worst of all now, worse than the charge even. It was not passing through and happening to pass us. It was walking the edge of us. It was pacing, the way a thing paces the fence of a pen with something inside it, and it never once took its eyes off the pen, and we were what was in the pen, and we sat there and thought we were watching it. There was a moment in there too where Junie whispered that she thought she saw something else. Further back in the timber, another shape, lower, that moved when the big one moved. I never saw it. It is not on the tape, or if it is, I cannot find it in all the shake. But she is certain, and she is not a woman who invents things, and I have had to make my peace with the possibility that the one we saw was not the only one out there that morning, that there was a second one back in the dark trees, and that whatever the big one was deciding about us, it was maybe not deciding it alone. Then it stopped. It stopped mid-stride, and it turned its head, and it turned its whole body, and it looked across that meadow straight at us. And I felt it. I know how that sounds. I felt it clock us, felt it clock the camera, felt the whole thing change. Up until that second, we had been watching it. Now it was watching us. And the distance across that meadow that had felt like plenty of distance, a good 200 yards of open ground, suddenly felt like nothing at all. Felt like a thing that could be crossed. Felt like it was already halfway gone. I got the face in the camera for a second when it turned. Wide, flat, that heavy brow, more like a person's face than an animal's. And that is what I could not handle. That it had a face that could look at you like it was deciding something. There was nothing blank about it. That is what people get wrong when they imagine it. They imagine a dumb animal face. This was not dumb. This was a face with something going on behind it. And what was going on behind it was us, and it stood there, and it looked at us, and it did not move, and we did not move. And Junie said, very quiet, "Do not run." She said it barely moving her lips. "Do not run." And every single thing in my body wanted to run. Every animal part of me was screaming to turn and go, and her one steady whispered word was the only thing holding me in place. Because some part of her knew, the way you know things you were never taught, that running was exactly what it was waiting for. I do not know how long that stillness lasted. On the tape, it is not long, maybe 20 seconds. Standing in it, it was forever. It just looked at us across the meadow, reading us. And I know now, though I did not know it then, that 3 weeks earlier and one drainage over it had spent 4 hours reading a man in a tree the same patient way. It was deciding. You could feel it deciding. And then it decided. It came at us. I do not have clean footage of this part because I stopped being a person holding a camera and became a person trying to live. What is on the tape is the ground and the sky and the grass whipping and my own voice not making words, just sound. It came across that meadow at us, and it was fast. It was so much faster than something that size should be. It did not lope. It did not lumber. It came low and hard and straight, and the ground was just disappearing under it. And I had time in the middle of that to understand one single complete thought, which was that we were not going to outrun it. There was no outrunning that. Whatever happened next was going to be whatever it decided, and there was nothing, not one thing that Junie or I could do about it. That is a terrible thing to understand all the way through. In the space of a couple of seconds, it empties you out. And then it stopped. It stopped maybe 40 feet from us, hard. It pulled up out of that charge and planted, and the ground actually shook. I felt it come up through my boots, and it stood close enough now that I could smell it. A rank, wet animal reek that closed my throat close enough that I could see it breathing. The huge chest going close enough that all the size of it that had been far away and unreal was right there and completely real in front of us. And it did not come the last 40 feet. It stood there, huge, breathing, looking down at us across that last stretch of grass. And it had never meant to reach us. I understood that standing there with my legs gone to water and Junie's fingers dug into my arm hard enough to bruise. If it had meant to reach us, it would have reached us. It had shown us exactly how fast it could close the distance, and then it had chosen at the last possible moment not to. It stopped because stopping was the point. The charge was not an attack. The charge was a sentence, and the period on the end of it was this standing over us close enough to touch, this letting us feel every bit of what it could do and then not doing it. It had come to tell us something, and 40 feet away it told us, and the telling was, do not come back, do not follow, do not. And I have never in my life understood a thing so completely without a single word in it. It held there a moment longer, it let it land, and then it lifted its head and it made a sound, not a roar, lower than a roar, a deep, chesty huff that I felt more than heard. And I understood that too. That was the last of it. That was the door closing. Then it turned, unhurried again, all the speed gone out of it as fast as it had come, and it walked back the way it had come, along the tree line and into the timber, and it did not look back. It did not need to look back. It had said everything it came to say. We did not move for a long time. A long time. We sat there at the edge of the timber long after it was gone, not because we were brave, but because we could not make our bodies work. And the meadow slowly came back to life around us. A bird somewhere, then another. The country filling back in now that the thing had left it, and that was almost the eeriest part watching the woods. Remember how to be woods again in the space it left behind. When we finally did move, we walked backward to the truck, both of us, not turning our backs to the tree line the whole way, stumbling over ground we could not see because we would not look away from the trees. And partway down the trail, we came on something we had walked right past on the way in without seeing, because on the way in there had been no reason to look. In the soft ground at the edge of the trail where it crossed a wet seep, there was a track, one clear track pressed deep. It was a bare foot, longer than the length of my own boot by half again, the toes spread, the whole thing sunk into the mud far deeper than my weight sank beside it when I put my boot down to compare. We did not stop long. Neither of us wanted to be crouched down over that print with our backs to the timber for 1 second longer than we had to be. But I have that in my head now too, alongside everything else. The fact that it had come down that trail ahead of us in the dark, that it had walked the same path we walked, that when I woke in the truck to that hollow clacking in the night, it was already down here in the low country, walking the way we would walk in a few hours, waiting. We got to the truck, and I could not get the key in the ignition for shaking. Junie had to take it from me and do it. We did not talk until we were on the paved road, miles down, out of the trees, out of that country. Junie was the one who finally said it out loud, that it could have had us, that there was nothing we could have done, and that it had chosen not to. Neither of us slept right for a long time after. She still does not. Some nights she wakes up and says she can smell it, and there's nothing I can say to that, because some nights so can I. What can be measured from the footage is the charge. Quist marked the frame where the animal broke from its stand at the tree line, and the frame where it pulled up in front of the witnesses, and worked the distance across the meadow against the elapsed time, and the log notes the closing speed as inconsistent with a human being of any size or training. That is all the log says about it. a number that does not fit again. The same kind of number that had come out of the Redfern file in a different form 3 weeks before. The recognition is the part that matters, and it is the part that turned two separate strange mornings into one thing. When Quist put the Preto footage next to the Redfern footage, in the frame where the animal turns and holds its head toward the camera across the meadow, the left ear is clear. There is a torn notch out of the top of it, a clean V missing from the edge, an old healed injury. It is the same notch in the same ear on the same side as the notch on the animal that had stood at the base of Isaac Redfern's tree. Within the limits of what footage can tell you, it is the same animal. The one that spent 4 hours testing a man in a tree above a dead elk had come one drainage over 3 weeks later and warned 2 people out of a meadow and let them live. The pattern held across both files, and Quist noted it plainly and drew no conclusion from it, because drawing conclusions was not the job. Up close in the tree, it had tested a man and taken his fear apart piece by piece and then let him go. At a distance in the meadow, it had warned 2 people off with a charge it never finished. 2 encounters, 1 animal, 1 torn ear. Both times it had every reason and every opportunity to do more, and both times it chose the edge of the thing and no further. It seemed to know exactly where that edge was. It seemed to put people right up against it on purpose, to hold them there, to make them feel it, and then to step back. Nobody has a good answer for why. Prieto does not. He has been asked whether he thinks the thing was being merciful, and he says he does not think mercy is the right word, and he does not have the right word, and he has stopped trying to find it. Mercy, he says, is when you could not have known better and were spared anyway. This was not that. This knew exactly what it was doing. It chose the fear and it chose the sparing, and it chose them both with the same cold care. And there is a word for a thing that does that, and he does not want to say it about anything that lives in the woods behind his valley.
He says only that some nights he lies awake, sure that it is still out there, in that country, going drainage to drainage, letting people see it, letting people live, and choosing every single time exactly what it lets them carry home. Real or fake, you decide.
I need to get this down while I'm still the one telling it. That is going to sound strange to you, and I do not have time to make it sound less strange. The next full moon is 11 days out, and I do not think I will be able to trust myself to tell it straight after that. So I am telling it now, tonight, while my hands are still my hands and the words are still mine to pick. If you are hearing this, then it went the way I'm afraid it is going to go, and I am sorry, and I want you to at least know that I tried to tell the truth about it before the end. My name is Thane Bellard. I want to say that plainly because there is going to come a point in this where you stop being sure there is a man saying these words, and I want you to have heard the man first. I am 37 years old. I have lived in the West Fork drainage of the Bitterroot my whole life, and something has been happening to me on a clock I did not set and cannot stop. And I have spent months trying to explain it to myself as anything other than what it is, and I have run out of other things to call it. Let me tell you who I was so you know what you are losing. I ran a trap line and I did survey work for the county, line of sight and boundary stuff, which meant I spent more days in that country than in my own house. I knew the West Fork the way you know a face. I am telling you this because I need you to understand that I am not a man who scares easy or sees things. When people in the next drainage started talking last fall about a Bigfoot, some big dark thing walking the tree lines in daylight, warning folks out of meadows, I laughed it off with everybody else. I said there's always a story up here. I said people see a bear and their imagination does the rest. I had no patience for it. I want that on the record, that I was the last man in this valley to believe in anything, right up until the thing I could not believe in was me. There is one person I have to mention, and it is the hardest part of this, so I will just say it. My sister, Cora. She is younger than me, and she is the only family I have left, and she does not know any of this, and every choice I have made in the last few months has been shaped around making sure she never has to. Our mother passed 4 years ago, and our father a long time before that, and it has just been the two of us since, and she checks on me the way you check on your only family, and I have spent these last months lying to her with every phone call. She is the fixed point. Whatever I am now, I have been trying to keep it away from her. Remember that. When we get to the end, I need you to remember that that was the whole of what I was trying to do. The first time, I did not know it for what it was. That is what I want you to understand about the beginning. There was no moment where I turned into something in front of a mirror. It was quieter and worse than that. It started as a hunger that was not hunger. I would be sitting in my own kitchen and feel a wrongness come up in me, a pull, a pressure behind the eyes, and a want that did not have a shape yet. And then there would be a gap. I would come back to myself somewhere I had not walked to. Out past the woodshed once on my hands and knees in the dark with the taste of something in my mouth that I made myself not think about. My clothes wrong, mud on me that was not from anywhere I remembered being. Dirt packed under my nails so deep it took days to get out. I told myself it was sleepwalking. I told myself it was stress, that I was working too hard, that a man can lose an hour and it does not mean anything. I looked up sleep disorders on the library computer, and I read about people who cook and drive in their sleep, and I held on to that for weeks, like a man holding onto a rope over a drop. I told myself a lot of things in those first weeks, and I believed them the way you believe a thing you cannot afford to doubt. The morning I could not tell myself anything anymore, there were tracks leaving my back door. I want to describe them exactly because they are the thing that ended the lying. They started at my back step as boot prints, my size, the tread I know. And I followed them out across the yard because I did not understand yet. And about 30 feet from the house, the boot prints changed, not all at once. Over a few strides, they spread and lengthened, and the toes became something else. And by the tree line, they were not the print of any boot or any foot I could name. Long, clawed. The heel set wrong, the whole weight of the stride landing forward like an animal that walks on the balls of feet that are not feet, and the stride itself getting longer as it went, 3 feet, then 4, then more than a running man could cover, out past the tree line and gone into country I could not follow at that hour. I stood at my own tree line and looked at the place where my prints stopped being mine, and I did not have one single thing left to tell myself. I found what I found later that day further up the draw, and I'm not going to describe it in full. I will only say that something had been killed, something big, and that it had not been killed the way an animal kills for food. And I could not account for the night, and the two facts sat next to each other in me and would not come apart. And there was one more thing that morning, and this is the one I still cannot hold in my head for very long. Coming back down the draw, I passed the still water in the beaver flat, and I looked into it without thinking the way you do. And the shape that looked back at me between the two dead snags on the far bank was not mine. It was tall, and it was wrong, and it stood the way nothing that walks on two legs should stand, hunched forward with too much shoulder and a head that came to a point, and the eyes in it took the low light and threw it back gold. It was gone when I turned to look straight at it. There was nothing on the far bank, but I saw the shape of what I'm becoming framed in the trees across the water before I ever let myself say the word for it, and I have never once since been able to unsee it. After that, I stopped pretending and I started preparing, because if I could not stop it, then the only thing left was to contain it, and containing it became my whole life. I learned the clock. It comes with the full moon and it comes hard, and it gives me a window on either side, a day or two, where I am still mostly myself and can still make choices. So I made choices. I built a thing you would not build unless you had to. Chains rated for machinery, the heavy kind they use for logging, set into the block wall of the old root cellar under the property with anchors I sank in concrete, and a way to lock myself into them from the inside that I could not undo from the inside once the change took my hands. The first cycle I tried it, I want to tell you, was the worst night of my life up to that point. I chained in at dusk and I waited and I felt it come, and I'm not going to be able to make you understand what it is to feel your own body stop being yours. The pain of it first, every joint, the long bones, the jaw, and then worse than the pain, the leaving. The me of me getting pushed down and back and small while something else came up into the space where I had been. And then the night, most of it gone, only the sounds left to me, the sounds of what I became throwing itself against those chains in the dark under my own house, the anchors groaning, my own throat making noises no throat should make. But the chains held, and in the morning I was myself again, naked and torn up and freezing on the cellar floor with the chains still fast, and nothing outside had been hurt. And I lay there and I cried and I thought, all right, the chains held. I can do this. I can hold it here every month for the rest of my life, and no one will ever know and no one will ever be hurt. For a while, that is what I did. I want you to see the shape of those months, because it was not all horror, and the not horror is its own kind of sad to me now. Most days I was just Thane. I ran my line. I did my survey work. I fixed the truck. I ate dinner with Cora on Sundays and let her think her brother was just tired, just run down, nothing that a good season would not fix. I sat across the table from her and passed the potatoes and asked about her work and was, for a few hours, exactly the man I had always been. And then once a month, I would drive myself down into the deepest part of the West Fork, further each time as I lost my nerve about the cellar being too close to the road, too close to people, and I would chain myself in the dark and lose the night and come back in the morning and drive home and be Thane again. Warmth and dread, turn and turn about. A normal life with a locked door in the middle of it, and me carrying the only key and the key getting heavier every month. I got good at it, is the terrible thing. I got a system. I want that known too, because it matters to what I became. I would fast the day before so the thing woke up hungry and spent its fury on the chains instead of the cellar door. I mapped out 3 sites deep in the drainage and rotated them so no one place got worn or noticed. I bought the chain in 3 different towns so no one clerk saw a man buying that much heavy chain at once. I planned it like the survey work, careful, methodical, a problem to be managed. And every month it held, and every month I let myself believe a little more that I had it beaten, that I could live a whole quiet life this way, one locked night out of 30, and no one the wiser. There was a cycle in the middle of that good stretch that I have to tell you about because it was the first crack and I did not read it as one. It was a cold, clear night, deep in the drainage, and I had chained in and the change had come, and in the morning the chains had held. Everything as it should be. But there were tracks in the frost around the cellar, not mine, not the things going out. These came in. Something had come to the cellar in the night, in the dark, while I was in there chained and out of my mind, and it had circled the place, close, and it had stood a long while at the little vent window at ground level where the frost was scuffed and pressed, and then it had gone back the way it came into the timber. Something had come to see me. Something out there in that country knew what was in that cellar and had come in the night to stand at the window and listen to it rage, and I have never known what it was, whether it was another one like what I become, or whether it was the thing from the next drainage over that everybody was whispering about. The big, dark one that walks in daylight, come down to have a look at the new thing in its country. I do not know. I only know I was not as alone in this as I had let myself believe, that there is more than one kind of wrong thing in these mountains, and that at least one of them had taken an interest in me. And there was another cycle later where I woke not on the floor, but standing upright in the corner of the cellar, chain facing the wall, my forehead resting against the coal block, in a posture no sleeping man falls into. And I understood that the thing had, at the end of the night, before the change let go of me, chosen to stand there and wait for the morning on its feet, patient, facing the wall like it was thinking, and that it had held that pose deliberately across the turn so that I would wake up inside it and know it was leaving me messages by then. It had started to leave me messages in the arrangement of my own body, and I had started, God help me, to read them. The door did not hold. The night it broke is the middle of this, not the end, though I did not know that then. It was a bad cycle, a hard one. I had felt it building for days, worse than usual, a pressure I could not fast away, and I had gone down the West Fork to the furthest site and chained in like always. And I came back to myself in the morning in the wrong place, not where I had chained, a mile off in the timber on the far side of a ridge, with the chains still on one wrist and torn clean off the anchor, links pulled open like they were made of tin. I do not remember the night. I remember waking with the taste and the mud and the torn chain, and I remember the long, cold, naked walk back over the ridge to where I had left my clothes and my truck, checking every step for what I might have done, and finding nothing and being afraid of the nothing. And then a few days later, they found Del Hartigan. Del ran cattle on the leases at the mouth of the West Fork, and I had known him my whole life since we were boys. And they found him in the timber not far from where I woke with the chain on my wrist. And there was talk of a bear, of a mountain lion, of the Bigfoot, the next drainage over that everybody had been whispering about all fall. And I sat in my truck outside the feed store and listened to men I have known my whole life build every explanation for Del Hartigan except the one sitting in my own driveway with a torn chain in the bed of it. And I could not swear to a single one of them that they were wrong. I could not swear I was not there. I cannot tonight swear I was not there. That is the thing that has been eating me from the inside since, not knowing. Sitting in that truck with my hands shaking on the wheel, doing the math on the distance from where I woke to where they found him, and hating that the math worked. And being fairly sure that not knowing is a mercy I am not going to get to keep. Because I remember more every month now, and one of these mornings I'm going to remember that. I started hiding things after that. The torn chain, I drove up the North Fork and threw it in the river. The clothes, I burned. Anything the morning left behind, I got rid of. Careful, methodical, the same cold competence I had used to contain the thing now turned to covering for it. And I want to be honest that hiding it changed something in me toward my own account of things. Once you start covering for the other one, once you start cleaning up after it, disposing of the evidence of what it did, you have joined it a little. You are not just its prisoner anymore. You are its keeper, and worse than its keeper, its accomplice. And an accomplice is complicit. I do not fully trust the man telling you this, is what I am saying. He has been protecting the thing he is afraid of for months now. He threw the chain in the river not to protect other people, but to protect himself, and I do not know anymore where his loyalty actually sits. Whether he wants the thing stopped, or whether some part of him, some part of me, has started to want it free. do not trust me all the way. I do not. It has gotten stronger since. That is the part I have the least language for and the most fear of. The window of being myself on either side of the moon has gotten narrower. A full, clear day of warning shrunk down now to a few hours. And the worst thing, the thing I can barely make myself say, is that I remember more now. It used to be a black gap, clean, the night simply gone. Now pieces come back. I come back to myself with fragments of the night still in me, images that surface days later while I'm doing something ordinary and stop me cold. The feel of running full out through timber in the dark and not once being afraid of hitting anything. The smell of blood that is not a horror to the other one but a joy, a low, awful satisfaction that is not mine and is in me anyway, and that I catch myself in the worst moments almost missing. It is not that the man loses the night to the animal anymore. It is that the man is being let watch. And I do not know if that means I am winning back some ground inside it, some foothold, or if it means the thing is done pretending we are two people and is letting me know, on purpose, the way that thing in the meadow let those people know that we never were two people, that there was only ever the one of us wearing a quiet man like a coat. Which brings me to why I'm recording this tonight, 11 days out, when I told myself I would wait until it was closer. Cora called. She's coming up to the property. She has been worried about me because of course she has, because I have been a ghost to her for months, canceling Sundays, short on the phone, and she loves me and she can tell something is wrong even through all my lying. She is coming up to stay a few days and make sure her brother's all right, to cook for me and fuss at me and get to the bottom of whatever I'm not telling her. And she is coming on a date that I checked 3 times against the calendar, hoping I had it wrong. And I do not have it wrong. She will be here the night of the full moon. I have thought of everything. I have sat at this table for hours and thought of everything. I have thought of driving deep into the West Fork and chaining in and praying the chains hold this time. And I do not trust the chains anymore, not since the night they did not with what I have become in the months since. I have thought of telling her the truth, and I cannot make her carry it, and worse, I know her. She would not leave me if she knew. She would plant herself right here and try to save me. And her not leaving is the exact thing I cannot allow. I have thought of not being here at all when she arrives, of leaving her a note, and driving so far into the back country that whatever I become that night has nothing near it to find. And every plan I make founders on the same rock, which is that I do not control what it wants, and lately, in the pieces that come back to me, what it wants has started to have a shape, and the shape is not the deep country. The shape is not away, the shape is home. The shape, the last 2 cycles, has been this house, this table, the warm lit windows of the one place in the whole valley where the person I love best is going to be sleeping 11 days from now. So here is where I have come to, and it is the only true thing I have to end on. I do not know tonight whether I'm a man who becomes a monster or a monster that has spent 37 years remembering how to look like a man. I used to be sure it was the first one. I held on to the first one the way I held on to the sleepwalking, the way I held on to every explanation that let me keep being myself. I am not sure anymore. And the whole of what I have left, the whole of the person I am fighting to still be for 11 more days, comes down to this one thing, that a man would find a way to drive away from his sister and a monster would find a reason to wait for her. And in 11 days, I am going to find out for certain which of those 2 things I am. And so, God help her, is she. I can see headlights coming up the West Fork Road. She is early. She is days early. She said the weekend. This is not the weekend. This is not the night. I have counted it, and it is not the night. The moon is not full tonight, so it is all right. It has to be all right. She just came early to surprise her brother. That is all this is. I just have to go out and meet her on the porch and be thane. Be thane for her the way I have been for 11.
Real or fake, you decide. I was Alex, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.